Okay, for those of you who are participating via Zoom, there is a hand icon that you can use to indicate stuff. If you can hear me, can you just go and raise that hand icon to let me know that you can hear me? Outstanding. Okay. Very good. So for those of you who are, can someone who's okay, you can take your hands down now. For those, can someone who's listening via Zoom try to ask a question?
You mean just talk?
Yes, there you go. It worked. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So let's get started in that case. For those of you who are participating via Zoom, it sounds like if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask that question. If you're here in the classroom, just feel free to raise your hand. Please keep your mask on and just say it as loud as you can, and I'll try to repeat the question. And I'll repeat it so that the folks following on Zoom can hear it as well. So let's get started. My name is Brad Vanderzanden, and hopefully you are here for either CS 465 or 565. And the most important piece of information I can give you to start is the web address for this course. In fact, it probably can't see it easily there, so let me do it here. So this web address right here will give you most of the information that you need for this course. It has the homework assignments, the lecture notes, etc. Okay. So before I get to that, just wanted to give you that link. But before we get to the housekeeping, I want to give you a quick overview of what this course is about. Then I want to go through some housekeeping for today. And finally, I want to, time should permit, to actually get into a little bit of the material for today. Okay, so I believe for those watching from home, I've shared my screen, and again, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Can you see the screen that I'm projecting? Very good. Okay, outstanding. You can take those hands down again. So this course is essentially a hybrid between databases and web programming, although the two go hand in hand because most web programming is integrally tied to databases. So the first half of this course, roughly the first 7 weeks, is devoted to databases, primarily to relational databases because they're still by far the predominant database out there, but we will spend a week talking about NoSQL, which is a rapidly expanding contender to relational databases. Now, one issue with NoSQL is there are numerous variations of NoSQL databases. We will cover the most common one, which is MongoDB. Whereas with relational databases, it's pretty much standardized around the relational model. And it's pretty easy, therefore, to talk about the different features of them. So we'll be talking about the query language, and we'll be using MySQL in this course. Because this is CS, we will spend a week talking about the theory behind relational databases. And if you're wondering about the prerequisite for this course, which is CS311, it's essentially because of the design or the theory that you see, and for the design that follows. So we'll go over how to design a database. So most people are familiar with using one, but as computer scientists, you're much more likely actually to also be asked to design one. It's a very important skill to have. And there's a number of techniques involved, normalization and entity relationship diagrams, which right now don't mean a whole lot to you, but they will by the time the course is done. And then physical implementation. So how you implement the database is very important. And you can do things to speed up the query optimizer that tries to satisfy queries by doing things like using indices. Okay, then the second half of the course, we move on to web programming. And we talk about the front end or front end GUI, which is HTML and cascading style sheets. Then we move on to the server side, where you are generally processing requests from the client. You're often interacting with a database, and we'll be talking about PHP, which is the most commonly used server-side programming language. And finally, we will talk about JavaScript, which is a language used on the client side that allows you to interact with the GUI. So HTML is more about the presentation of the graphical user interface. Cascading style sheets are about how that is laid out. And JavaScript is about the stream of events that allow you to interact through mouse clicks, through typing with the interface. And we'll talk about a special case Node.js, which is also a server-side language that is also becoming increasingly common. And also, interesting thing, I wish I knew how some of these websites that they're doing for the vaccine appointments have been implemented. I know they've been crashing a lot. And I've been wondering whether they're using Node.js to implement it, because in fact, Node.js is not a particularly good way to implement a website that anticipates having a heavy volume of traffic. It's, you use PHP for implementing that kind of server. So I just wonder whether someone thought, oh, Node.js is easy to use, so I'm going to set up the appointment systems that way, and that's just like a guaranteed crash, because they're not meant for heavy traffic. So you'll be able to answer questions like that. Why I should use, say, PHP, or why I might want to use Node.js for the server side. So we'll spend 7 weeks on that as well. So databases are incredibly useful for organizing structured data. I know that there is also a big market for so-called unstructured or less structured data. We won't cover that in this course. There are other courses that are offered here, more in the context of like data mining or data archaeology, that talk more about less structured data. So this course, we are assuming that the data we are representing is fairly well structured. Okay. Questions thus far? Okay. So let's get into some housekeeping in that case. First of all, I think you've already seen the announcement. You're free to come to class. If you're signed up on Tuesday, I can tell right now there is room for you here in the classroom on Thursday, vice versa. I believe it's important to give you the in-person option. So if there's even one person here, I will be here. Okay. But if you want to take it online, that is fine. I'm obviously simulcasting via Zoom right now. I'm also taping, and we'll post this to the website later today, so you can watch it offline as well. So basically, there's 3 modalities for taking the course. We'll figure out how to administer the one exam later on, so don't worry about the exam logistics yet. Office hours, I plan to hold via Zoom. and we'll get to that. The textbook right now, we're trying to work with ball shops to get it fixed. Before class started, it seems like if you just go to the assignment links right now, so if you go to assignments or to modules, it doesn't matter what, and you just click on the pre-class activity, it appears from what I'm told you can get access to the textbook that way, and you can complete the assignment. But we're trying to get it so that you don't have to go through the assignment to get access to the textbook. You should have access through the textbook through the modules. When you click on modules, it should be possible for you to see an e-textbook module and then be able to click through to zyBooks. You'll see right now I haven't published it because according to a couple people who tried to do it here in the class, they just got an error message. So right now, you won't see this on your own Canvas site because I haven't published it and because Ball Shop still hasn't been able to get it working. Hopefully we'll have it fixed by Tuesday. Okay, so where to find things and the like, let's do some housekeeping. So my office hours are not Monday from 1 to 12. That would be a very generous. They are 11 to 12 on Monday and Tuesday from 4:15 to 5:15. You can also make an appointment with me. My email, bvanderzee@utk.edu. I prefer that you only email me with personal things like needing to miss an exam because there will be a discussion board for this course, although that's also up in the air right now. I think most of you are used to using Piazza, and apparently Piazza has started to charge before they were free. And the department is trying to figure out what to do. They haven't pulled the trigger yet. The other possibility, it seems, is something called a yellow dig, but that looked like the direction we were going to go. And then I guess yesterday we found out that that costs money too. So stay tuned for what the discussion board will be. I would say right now, I've never used Canvas discussions, but I would say right now, if you have a question out of class, I'd like you to share it with everyone. So I'd say right now, probably the best thing to do is keep your eye on the discussions, the Canvas discussions thing. It's not the best discussion board, but until we have, the department gives us some clarity on whether we have Piazza or Yellow Dig, just for the next few days, I'll post to announcements. So that way, but if you have a question or anything, post it to discussion, okay? And the reason I want you to post your questions to discussion rather than sending them to me is because generally, if you have that question, there's 10 other people with that question. Like homework assignment, I'll get the same question 10 different times. I don't want that to happen. So I have you post your questions about homework assignments, about scheduling and the like to the discussion board, and that way I answer it or the TA answers it, and everyone gets the same answer. That's the other thing, is that if the TA and I are on the same different page, we make sure we're on the same page through the discussion board. If the TA says something and I disagree, I can just step right in and say, whoops, no, do it this way. Okay, so post to the discussion board. TAs, also a little bit up in flux right now. So that information will be on the course website. I'll show you where in a moment, but right now it still seems to be a bit in flux. Most part, I plan to have the TAs do grading. I will be handling office hours. So it's possible that one of the TAs may have some office hours, but looking at whom I've been assigned, it looks like I might be sharing them with 360. We all know how light the load is in 360 and that the TA will probably have plenty of time for this course, 360 not being demanding in any way. So you get the point. 360 is actually very demanding, and so probably you'll need to come and ask your questions of me. Okay, so where to find things? So the general course information, your assigned readings, lecture slides, the homework assignments, they're all at the website you see here. And if you're in 565, that applies to you too. This is a joint lecture. Canvas is where you submit stuff. So it's where you submit the homework and the projects. There are often quizzes after class. I know I have yellow dig engage here. Let's just get rid of that for the time being because, as I say, it's up in the air. So at any rate, you will submit the homework and your projects on Canvas. There are also pre-class, should say that there are pre-class / after class participation activities. And that is something else that you will need to do on Canvas. So what I would say is there's kind of a checklist before each class. So before each class, you want to make sure that you do the pre-class participation activity, if any. Okay, there'll be more of those probably in the second half of the class, but there's still definitely ones in the first half. Complete quiz / after class activity from the previous lecture. And there's no quiz or after class activity today, so don't worry about it. And we'll get to the pre-class activities in a moment, but always make sure you do that. Every semester, I get a couple students who said, I forgot all about the quizzes. So starting Tuesday, there's generally either a quiz or a after class activity. The reason for that is studies show that if you rehearse material within 48 hours of having first seen it, you're more likely to retain it than if you say wait a week or two, which is when you often get to the homework. So it's basically, they're meant to be about 20 minutes and just meant to force you to go over that material and rehearse it. I know I make these after class activities due, if for Tuesday, they're due Thursday before class, but for Thursday, they're not due until Tuesday. So really it's 120 hours, but I don't like to make things due on a weekend, and 48 hours after the Thursday is sometime on the weekend. So I just make the quiz or after class activity for the Thursday class due on Tuesday. Okay, pre-class participation activities. It's the same thing as to try to get you to read the material before you come to class, because if you do so, you're just better prepared. And the reason I use zyBooks is they are punchy. They are not long-winded like most textbooks are. They hit you, they get it to the point, then they hit you with some short, like multiple choice, true, false, matching, maybe have you do a simple exercise that forces you to measure your understanding of that material before you move on. And the activities, you can correct your mistakes. So to not get 100 on them is, I mean, there's no reason not to get 100 on them, okay? So at any rate, that's a way to try to make sure that before you come to class, you actually have looked at it and are somewhat familiar with the material. Okay, so we go to the website for the class and we make it a lot bigger than that. There we go. You'll see that the big ones are the general information, lecture notes, reading assignments, homework assignments. The homework policy basically says that you cannot work, that you work by yourself, that you don't copy from others, don't use material from the internet. The work has to be your own. Graduate students will have a database project. Don't worry about that now, but that will be due at the end of March, obviously a ways away. The TA information, we'll get that posted once they are up. And the exam, there will be one midterm, no finals. So the midterm will be Thursday, March 11th, and we'll cover the database portion of the course. The second half of the course, you'll just have a web project, and that will replace the final. Undergraduates are allowed to work with a partner on the web project. Graduate students aren't. Okay, so graduate students, you have to do something to earn that graduate credit. The way you earn it is you do the database project and you are going to work by yourself on the web projects. Okay, if you come to class, I don't want to politicize it. This is for my health, okay? You're masked over your mouth and nose, okay? And also, UT has asked no food or drink consumed in the classroom because you'd have to remove your mask. So, like I said, I don't want to politicize it. It protects me. That's why I'm here, okay? So, okay. Oops. Okay, under general information, again, we have my office hours. Once the TAs, I'll probably have the TAs do maybe an office hour because you'll have questions about the grading. One thing I know for sure is that sometimes, especially early on, you're going to submit stuff that doesn't work. And because we probably will use some kind of automated scripts to grade things, you'll get a 0, but it pretty much works. And what I allow you to do is get in touch with the TA and say, look, I mean, yeah, I know it didn't work, but look, if I'd done this or that, it would work. Can I get some credit back? Okay, so when you get, especially your first homework assignment back and you get a bunch of zeros, don't panic. Talk to the TA and, you know, show them, hey, this is what I did. Can I get some partial credit? Okay. As I say, the required textbook should be on Canvas, hopefully by Tuesday. Don't worry about reference books. I have, where the Zybook is weak, I have posted some handouts that should help. So I don't think you are going to need anything other than the textbook. Okay, grading, something everyone is always keen to know about. So for undergraduates, you can see it there. Homework assignments are 30%. The participation activities, which you should, if you do them religiously, you should get the full 5%. The quizzes and challenge activities, 10%. I know with the quizzes that you won't be able to complete every one. Things always come up. I drop, I think it's 2 quizzes. Yes, I drop your 2 lowest quiz scores at the end of the class, and I think I dropped something like 1 of your after class activities. So basically, I think the way it works is generally the quizzes end up as 5% and the challenge activities, which are in the ebook, they constitute 5% typically. Then the midterm will be 25% and the web project 30%. This is the grading scale that you get in this range. You're guaranteed that grade. I sometimes curve more so for undergraduates than for graduate students. It's rather uncommon that I curve for graduate students. Pretty unusual that I curve my A's for undergraduates, more likely that the B's and C's get curved. Okay, I don't give A minuses. You get an A, you get an A. Okay. For graduate students, because of the database project, the breakdown is a little different. The midterm and the homework assignments are worth 5% less because the database project is worth 10%. And grading scale is same as for the undergrads. Okay. So again, on the quizzes, if you miss one, please don't ask for an extension or a makeup. The reason I give you 2 misses is for that reason. I know you have conferences, you catch something, something goes wrong. That's why the drops are there. So I don't give extensions or makeups on the quizzes, but you do have a little latitude there. Okay, if you should miss an exam and not have an excuse, we're going to have to figure out what to do because I'm not giving a final this time. So this has never come into play. I'll figure it out if it does. Okay, lecture notes. So you can see every day I have topic for the day, assigned readings, and you do all the participation activities for those readings. So you don't do the challenge activities, okay? Just the participation activities. The challenge activities are beefier and would take you more time. And then I have the slides that I've used in class. So for example, today, you can see that I have all these slides. I'll have to modify them slightly once I get the TA information and also once I figure out what the discussion board is. Also, sometimes there are notes. So for example, today, here's my online notes for the today's topic. So I sometimes supplement what the book has with my own notes. And then you see here a link lecture. That's my taped lecture. Now, right now, there's always a lecture from a previous semester. But sometimes I forget to record. This Zoom thing should be automatically recording. So, but at any rate, you click on the lecture link, you should be able to get the lecture, a link to the lecture. Probably will be uploading to YouTube. That's worked well before, but it shouldn't really matter to you. As long as you push on that, you should get the lecture. Homework tells you when the homework is assigned and when it's due. If you click on it, you get the homework assignment. Okay, so for the first half of the class, you have homework assignments for the databases. And then when we get to the second half of the class, so after the exam on 311, you no longer have homework assignments, but now you have the web project. And the web project is broken into 4 parts because if I let you submit the whole thing at the end, you'll wait to the very end to do it. Not a good thing. So I broke the web project into 4 parts, and you'll do it in 4 parts, handing it in at the very end of classes. So no final exam, but the web project will be homework / well, no, the homework is the homework. The web projects are the web projects. So what I'm trying to say is after March 11th, when we turn to web programming, you won't have homework assignments anymore. You'll be working on the web projects. Okay, and then like I said, the graduate students will have a database project that will be assigned toward the end of the database portion of the course. So around the end of February, that'll give you a month to work on it. It takes a day or 2 from what I've been told to finish it. So it's not something that is a huge burden on you. You'll have a whole month. I'm sure you can figure out a way to work it in that time. So I think that covers logistics. Either questions here from anyone on Zoom? Are there anything on the chat for Zoom? Just a second. Nope, looks like nothing on chat. So, okay. In that case, what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of databases today. And let's got to do one, see if this still works. One thing I forgot to test out before coming in here today is this particular thing. So you see a crash, hopefully you won't. Okay, very good. So basically, here's your problem. You have a bunch of data, and you want to be able to represent that data. So in this course, what we're using is a property management. So let's say in this course, we are going to use a property management company as our case study. And that is because the book we used to use for this course used property management as an example. So property management has some things. It has owners. And it has properties for rent. It has renters. It has leases on those properties. It has employees or staff that manage the properties. And it has branches, branch offices. So it has all this information that it needs to store. And we would like to be able to query this information. Oftentimes, we would like to obtain information from 2 or more of these sources. So for example, we might ask which properties are owned by Brad Vanderzanden, in which case we need to query these 2 pieces of information. Or we may want to know how many properties are managed by some staff member. In that case, we'd need to involve these 2. So oftentimes we need to combine information from 2 or more sources. So this is where databases shine, okay? First of all, they shine when the data is well structured. So generally, each of these things are going to have what we call attributes. So for example, an owner might have a name. Hey, they might have an address. They might have a phone number. Probably an email address. Okay, a lease. It probably has a property, some kind of property ID to identify the property. It probably has some kind of pointer to the renter. Okay, maybe the owner. Probably has a begin date and an end. What else would it have? Oh, monthly rate. Okay, the important thing is that the information is well structured. Almost every lease will have these attributes. Almost every owner will have these attributes. Okay. When we talk about well-structured data, that's what we mean, that they almost all share the same attributes. Semi-structured or ill-structured data is data where each entity has only a subset of the attributes. Okay, so it's not really well-structured. Okay, so we want to organize this information some way. And I will just tell you that we normally talk about these items right here as entities. And we call these attributes. So what we're interested in doing is figuring out how to model these entities and attributes and how to be able to query this information in an efficient way. Okay, so what we have is terminology. So a database is a structured collection of data related data and its description. Okay, think of description as like variable declarations in a program. So in a program, you define like a class, right? You say class employee, string name, int ID, int or float salary. That's what we mean by description, okay? It's basically data types. Okay, then a database management system or DBMS is software that manages and controls access. To a database. And normally, there are three elements. There is a data definition language, which is abbreviated as the DDL. There is the data manipulation language, which we abbreviate as the DML. And then there is access control. So the data definition language is basically like the variable declarations part of your program. It's where you define your entities. And quite frankly, if you are used to declaring classes, an entity is basically like a class. And the fields of the class, the instance variables, are essentially like the attributes. So the data definition language is what you use to declare your entities and your attributes, the types of the attributes, like a salary is a, say, float. Name is a string. in that rental agreement. The start date and end dates are dates. One thing, data type that most databases, or all databases have that you won't find in traditional programming languages are date types, date and time types, because those are important. Then the data manipulation language is your so-called query language. It is the language that you use to, so the DEML is used to create, read, update, and delete data. I specifically did it in this form because you will often hear the acronym CRUD used. C-R-U-D. Create data, which means create a new instance of an entity, like a new lease. Read information. For example, tell me which properties are managed by Brad Vander Zanden. Update. Add a new, let's see, extend a lease. Change the end date of the lease. Change the monthly rate of the lease. Delete. Gets rid of something. We fire Brad Vander Zanden as a staff member, we delete him. Or some owner takes their business elsewhere, we delete that owner and their properties. Okay. So the data manipulation language is the one that is, so the DDL is used to define the description of the database. The DML is how we manipulate data. It's like the program. Okay, and then there is access control. So access control basically has the following features. So access control. We have security. Okay, so security is just stopping unauthorized people from getting access to the database. Okay, it also means only allowing people to see the data we want them to see. Okay, generally, the CEO can see everyone's salaries, but we don't want staff to see each other's salaries. Okay, so it's not just preventing unauthorized users from seeing the data, but making sure that that each person sees exactly that subset of the data that they are authorized to see. Okay. The next thing is integrity. So integrity means maintaining the consistency of the stored data. For example, we would prefer that an owner's address be in only one place in the database so that it stays consistent. We would rather not, but if we store the owner's address in 2 or more places in the database, it's important that it always be consistent, that we don't store the owner's address, say, as one address in the lease agreement and another way with the owner. Okay, so integrity means the data is kept consistent. And in general, that means that we try to reduce redundancy. We only try to store data once. Now, sometimes that's not possible because identifying information keys, what we call keys that uniquely identify entities, we often have to store them in multiple places. And so in that case, we have to make sure that those keys are always stored consistently. A social security number is an example of a key. Okay, and if it's stored in multiple places in the database, we want to make sure that it's always the same number for that individual. So that's integrity. Then we have concurrency. So it's important that multiple people be able to access the database simultaneously without introducing integrity problems. So that is concurrent access without introducing integrity issues. Okay, so we need to avoid race conditions essentially. Like if you're Amazon, you have one item left in stock. You want to allow multiple people to access your site at one time, but you don't want to allow two different people to get that last remaining item. Okay, that would be an issue with integrity. So that's what we mean by concurrency without introducing integrity issues. Basically, we can't have people stepping on each other. Okay? We want them to be able to access different parts of the database while locking, if one of you, Gerald, you're buying something, okay? What's your name? I forget. Alex? Yeah. So we want to stop Alex. If Gerald's buying a Porsche, it's our last Porsche, we don't want Alex to be able to get in there and swipe that Porsche out from under Gerald, okay? So Alex can go and he can buy the Jaguar, but he's going to be locked out of the data or the Porsche section while Gerald's at it. So that's concurrency. Then we have recovery control. So unfortunately, it's a fact of life that hardware crashes, that there are software bugs. And when that happens, some transactions will be only partially completed. Gerald's halfway through buying that Porsche and the website goes down. When it comes back up, it needs to be in a consistent state. Probably it would roll back. We call it roll back to the previous state. Unfortunately, Gerald, you'd have to re-enter your information, but at least it wouldn't be stuck in the middle. So recovery control is ensuring that when the hardware crashes or the software crashes, that transactions that are only partially completed, that they're properly handled. Normally that means they're rolled back. And any changes that were made, they are rolled back to a previous state. Okay, then there is a user accessible catalog. It's a user viewable catalog. All that is, the catalog is a description of the entities, their attributes, and their data types. It's just the ability to essentially look at the way the data, the DDL declared the database. Okay, and the user needs that because they need to know the names of the entities, they need to know the names of the attributes so that they can query. And also so that their programs know the types that they're getting. If they read a salary, is that an integer or is it a decimal number? If they read the begin date, is that just a date or is it a timestamp that has a time associated with it? So they need to know what attributes they're getting. And then the final thing associated with access control is views. So we have our entities like owner, staff, property, but sometimes we'll create views that are soft entities, or they're not actually physically represented in the database, but they're combinations of data that are frequently viewed. So for example, we might have a view that is properties managed by staff. So that's not stored as an entity. It actually is combining information from the properties and the staff entities. So we create these views. Don't worry if you don't understand exactly what I mean right now. It will become clear later on. But we also can control what you see. So we might create a staff directory that is a subset of the attributes in the staff relation. So it might have each staff member's name, telephone number, and email address, but it might not have personal information like their home address or their salary or their date of birth, things that are considered to be private, okay? So that would also be an example of a view. And that goes hand in hand with security, making sure that everyone is only able to view that information that they're entitled to view. Okay. So in the good old days, which would be a long time ago, back in the 70s, before there were really, well, before there was the relational database, there was an alternative paradigm for handling data, and it was a so-called file-based system. So you used to have just a whole bunch of, so a file-based system is an alternative to database, which I'll abbreviate as DB. Okay, so what they did was they were just a collection of files. Scattered across different departments. And possibly in different formats. For example, maybe one department might have used Java, another might use C, another might use COBOL, very archaic language. But each of those languages might format the files differently. So this created all kinds of issues. Okay, so some of the disadvantages of this approach. Okay, integrity was a huge issue because each department might duplicate the data. And maybe as an owner, I call up my representative at the property management company and say, look, I'm moving. Change my address. And that information never reaches the lease department that remits my checks. So the lease department keeps sending my checks to the old address. Well, I'm sure the new owner of my old address likes that as they cash my checks. I don't like that so much because my income just disappeared. So that was a big issue, is that oftentimes the different departments, they kept redundant data. They didn't necessarily always keep it consistent. Okay, so another big problem was that it was hard to get reports, or hard for end users to get timely reports. Because after all, end users typically aren't programmers. And the only way that you could get these reports was to write a program. Okay, so that was a huge disadvantage. Okay. Basically, it boils down to these, I guess, interoperable. Okay, so I'll add one more issue. So I'm running out, so I'll put the C here. Lack of interoperability. Operability. There we go. So you have different departments, different formats. And remember I said you have to sometimes combine information from two or more files. Well, if they're in different formats, the problem. Okay, so the fact that you had different formats led to this lack of interoperability, which makes it hard to pull together, to pull info from two different places. So those were the big three reasons. And you spend a lot of money on programmer support. It was these interoperability issues. It was not good. And for that reason, people looked for a better approach, and that was the database approach. So databases centralize the data. Okay, so they put it in one place. They make it easy for users to query the data, so you don't need a programmer to come in and do it for them. They use algorithms. Well, actually, you as a designer typically use algorithms to ensure that there is as little redundancy as possible, thus ensuring the integrity of the data. So basically, databases were designed to fix these three disadvantages. Okay, so basically, once you have the database, it becomes a lot easier for users to write their own queries. It becomes a lot easier to keep the data consistent, and it becomes a lot easier to combine access. A fourth feature is it became a lot easier to support concurrency. Okay, so let's just quickly say DBMSs or database, I'll just say database advantages. So integrity, ease of querying, concurrency, okay. Under integrity, it also means controls redundancy. So generally, information that only has to be stored once is only stored once, like your address, your email address, your salary. Okay. And then interoperability. In my notes, I say sharing of data, but what this really means is interoperability. Okay, and the fifth one was decreased maintenance costs. Okay, usually it comes from a couple of ones. First of all, oftentimes you just buy the software package from like Oracle. Oracle is the big player in databases, so you don't need the big programming staff anymore. But you can imagine the nightmare when you had files in different formats. If you wanted to write a report that pulled information from two different formats, that was an issue. It used to be that you had to hard code the data description in the program. So if you changed, say, the width of a field to 40, from 40 characters to 50 characters, you actually had to go in and change all the programs and change their data structures to say things like, okay, now it's 50 characters. So it's just decreased maintenance costs associated with databases. Now, they do have a number of disadvantages as well. So their disadvantages is, first of all, cost and complexity. They are not simple beasts. And when you buy one, you often get more features than you need, and you may be paying for features you don't need. So you have to balance that against the cost of writing your own custom file system, which of course you're probably not going to do. Because of their complexity, okay, that implies more hardware. So you're probably going to have more, it's going to be more costly because you're going to need probably more hardware to run it, just because it's more bloated, okay? Think of the spreadsheets or how with each time you get a new operating system, you now need a new computer because the new operating system just runs too slowly on your existing hardware. Same idea, code bloat. Performance. So generally, you can write something by hand faster than a general algorithm can do something. So big thing is when you write a query, it has to be translated into a series of operations on files. Okay, so a database is a collection of files at the physical layer. The physical implementation, a database is a collection of files. So you write a query, it has to be translated into a set of operations on files. It's like a compiler. Okay, we call it a query optimizer. It takes a query written in a language, it compiles it, and translates it into a series of operations on files. Okay, so you have a query optimizer compiles and creates, in effect, a program that is a series of operations, set of file operations. Well, just like if you wrote something in assembly language, you could probably do better than a compiler does. The same thing here. Probably if you wrote the set of file operations that you wanted to perform for a query, there's a good chance you could do it faster than what the query optimizer comes up with. Okay, but generally these query optimizers are pretty good, just like today's compilers are pretty good. So the amount of improvement you get may be fairly minuscule. The amount of effort you put into getting that improvement may be pretty considerable. Okay, it's just like scripting languages. Why do we use scripting languages? Not because they're fast, because they're not as fast as compiled languages, but they save us a boatload of time. So it's the same thing. yeah, the performance may not be quite as good as if you hand coded the stuff, but you save a lot of time and money by not having to hire those people to do it. Okay, greater impact of a failure. Why might there be a greater impact of failure? Yes.
Because there's only one source.
Yes. So both, because it's one source, you centralize it. So you're kind of right, because redundancy means if it's decentralized and one part goes down, the information's still available someplace else. So the problem is when you centralize, that's great for concurrency. It's great for getting for interoperability. But if that central node goes down, you're toast. Okay, your whole site's down. Amazon down. Now, Amazon isn't like that because Amazon is replicating. But if you're, that's just the general thing, is that if the centralized database goes down, you're down until you can get it back up. Whereas the file system was decentralized, so if one department went down, the other departments could continue to operate. Okay, and the final disadvantage, the data has to be structured. Now, it's amazing how often you can turn semi-structured data into structured data. But nonetheless, that can be a pain in the neck at times. So, as I say, we're blessed that much of the data that we need to deal with in this world is structured, and therefore databases work well. But that's not always the case. Okay, so with that, I will let you go. Before I do that, you need to make sure that there's no quiz for today, but there are due next Tuesday. You need to do both the pre-class for today and the pre-class for Tuesday. So kind of two reading assignments there. And next time we will get into relational databases and talk about what they are, the terminology, and the like. Make sure that you kind of check in occasionally with the announcements over the weekend. I'll give you updates on the TAs and on the textbook as I get them. Okay, so you're good to go. And let's see. If you have questions, I guess kind of just give me a little distance. And if you got questions on Zoom, same thing, just speak up. Okay, so everyone's free to go.
I had a quick question, specific to me, if that's all right.
Yep.
So I'm taking this class as a graduate course, but I'm an undergraduate. I'm doing the 5-year BS-MS program. So I'm signed up for 565, but I need your signature on a form that allows me to count it as graduate credit.
Okay.
I'm over Zoom right now, but could I maybe email you that form?
Yes. Let me see if I'll see if I can't sign that form. There should be a way for me to digitally sign it. Because if we can't, we'll figure out some other way. But just send me it, and I'll try to digitally sign it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Going once, going twice. I don't get one, and then by the time I say 3, I'm shutting this meeting down. Okay. So I am taking off.